To job or to grad school? That is the question. This is one of the most common questions I receive is, should I take some time off after my undergraduate education to go out and work for a while, or should I continue straight on to graduate school? There's really no right or wrong answer to this question. A lot of it is going to depend on your personal situation. But what I'd like to suggest is a few different factors that you may want to weigh as you're trying to decide which avenue is right for you. Let's take a look at some of these. In some cases, the decision is fairly straightforward. For example, if your discipline requires or recommends that you have work experience before you apply, a common example of this is the MBA that usually requires that you have at least 3 to 5 years of work experience, sometimes even more. This isn't the only example, however. There's other disciplines. For example, some of the fine arts programs will require that you have a professional portfolio that you can present to them. And if you don't have a strong enough portfolio, then it can make sense for you to go out and work for a while, start to develop more of your credentials, and then use that to put together a stronger application when you go to apply. On the flip side, if your career requires an advanced degree to even begin the path that you are interested in, for example, if you are interested in becoming a professor, or you're interested in a research career, or other disciplines like that that will require you to have that advanced certification in order to take that first step, then it makes sense for you to go ahead and jump right into that graduate school experience, get that degree, and then be able to launch your career from there. In a lot of cases, the decision is not so straightforward, and this may be the situation that you're in, where you kind of have the option to either go out and work for a while or continue straight on for grad school, and you're trying to decide which path is the right one for you. There's really 3 factors that I like to talk about here. The first one is what I call the money factor, and what expenses might be incurred if you continue on to grad school. The second one is the I need a break from school factor, and you may just be burnt out from your undergraduate experience, so we're going to talk about that. And then thirdly is the I have no idea what I want to do with my life factor, and which direction should you go if that's you. So we're going to take a look at each of these in turn. Let's go ahead and start with the money factor. And the way I like to talk about this is to give you some examples of kind of the job first argument, and talk about some of the pros and cons there of going out and working for a while first. And then I'll flip over and talk about some of the arguments from the grad school side and some of the pros and cons that are there. So as we look at the money factor and looking at the job first arguments, one of the really good reasons to go out and work for a while first is that you could save some money and pay off some of your existing student loans. And this can be a really beneficial thing, can make a lot of good financial sense. One of the downsides here is that it's very easy to spend this money rather than to save it or to pay off those loans like you intend. And you may not be able to pay off those loans or save up as much money as quickly as you anticipated. Even if you have a really good budget and spending plan and you're very diligent, unexpected expenses can come up and suddenly that money is not there when you thought it would be. It's very true that once you get out and start working, your lifestyle does typically tend to grow to meet the income that's coming in. Another challenge here is that it can be very hard to adjust from a full-time salary to go back to being a student. So when you're used to working full-time, you have that lifestyle, and then to suddenly shift from that to living off of a much smaller amount of money when you're back in school can be a major challenge, and that's something to factor in as you're thinking about this. On the plus side, some employers may pay for you to go to school, and this can be a really nice benefit. It's something I'd certainly encourage you to talk to them about as you're interviewing for different positions, is this a benefit that they have? The challenge here is that you would be required to juggle that full-time workload along with graduate school. And that is not an easy thing. Even just taking 1 or 2 graduate classes at a time, along with working full-time and everything else that you have going on in life, this is a major undertaking that you would be doing here. And it will also take you longer to complete that degree because you will only be able to take a couple of classes at a time. That length of time that you're juggling both that full-time work and the school becomes a longer time frame. You're often limited to non-thesis master's degrees, And this is not always a problem. This may in fact be the degree that you're interested in, and if so, then this is not a factor for you. But it is something to be aware of, that if you are interested in doing more of a research-based degree, or you're even thinking long-term you might be interested in the PhD, then this is not an option for you to be able to pursue those degrees while working full-time. And it may also include a years of service requirement. So a lot of employers that offer this benefit, they will pay for part or all of your graduate education, but in return, they will require you to work a certain number of years for the company in order to kind of recoup their investment, if you will, whether it's in your same position or perhaps they promote you into another position. And if you were to leave the company for some reason before those years of service are up, then you have to repay those educational expenses. And sometimes this may not be a problem. You may love your company and plan on staying there anyway, but just know that this is often a requirement, and that if something unexpected were to happen and you were to have to leave that company, then you could have that unexpected expense of having to pay back those educational services. On the flip side then, some of the arguments for why you should continue going on to graduate school. And the big one, of course, is that funding is available for graduate school. Here at Purdue, more than 70% of our full-time graduate students receive funding. And we talked about this a little bit in the intro to funding video, but I'll just reiterate a couple of the points here. Fellowships are one example. They can be either internal, which means the money is coming from the university, or external, which means that the money is coming from an outside entity such as a professional association or a government agency. And these fellowships are typically likened to undergraduate scholarships, where it's money that you can use to pay for your graduate education. Typically, you don't have to work for these funds. But by far the most common type of funding is an assistantship, where you work part-time doing either research or teaching or administrative duties for the university. And in return, you receive these benefits, including tuition, paycheck. Usually other benefits are associated with that as well. The downside of this funding, of course, is that it can be competitive, and it will vary depending on the degree that you're interested in pursuing. So PhD students are the first ones to be funded, and then the money will go to thesis master's students. Typically, non-thesis master's students are not funded. So if we jump over to the next factor here, the I need a break from school factor, if you are just kind of burnt out from that undergraduate experience, then going and getting a job can give you time off to have that mental break that you may need to be able to come back and really attack that graduate school experience with a fresh mentality. Some of the positives here is that you'll gain some additional work experience while you're out working, and it can also help you determine your focus. Having that additional experience, the different projects that you work on can help you identify problems that you're interested then in bringing back to graduate school, and you have that context when you come back to grad school and want to research these topics. On the downside, it is often hard to return to school once you start working. And this is true for a lot of different reasons. But one of the points I like to also add on here is that even applying to graduate school is harder. And this is a piece that students often don't think about, that once you are a few years out from your undergraduate experience, just going into that academic style again can be a challenge. And some of the components of the application, like standardized tests, the GRE, is a very common one that you may need to take for graduate school. Taking that exam, getting letters of recommendation, all of that can be harder when you're several years removed from your undergraduate experience. One of the things I recommend if you are planning on taking some time off between undergraduate and graduate school is to go ahead and take any required standardized tests while you're still finishing up your undergraduate experience. The GRE, for example, is good for 5 years. And so if you're planning on applying to grad school anytime in the next 5 years, take the exam now, and then you'll have that done and those scores ready, because a couple years down the road, it's going to be harder to study and to take that exam. And of course, life happens. There are unexpected things that come up that you just are not then able to return to grad school like you had planned. Perhaps you start a family and you've got young children you're taking care of. Perhaps you've got elderly parents you're caring for. Other things happen that make things much more complicated down the road than what they may be right now if you were to continue on. And the last factor I'll mention here is that you can also hit a career ceiling, and this will vary depending on the field that you're in. This is something I see a lot with our engineering students, because when they come out with a bachelor's degree, many of them can get very good jobs and they're really excited about that first step that they go out and start. But a few years down the road, they hit this career ceiling where they can't progress anymore within their positions until they get a graduate degree. And so then at that point, they either have to do the part-time grad school, non-thesis masters, and then they're juggling that grad school and working full-time at the same time, or they have to leave that position, go to grad school full-time, and then return. And that can be a real challenge. So this is something to be aware of as you're looking forward to the types of positions you want to have in the future. And don't think just about that first entry-level position that you're applying for. Think about your long-term career and what you ultimately want to hold. The other thing to think about is that some of those positions, even though they may not require a graduate degree today, they may by the time you work through the system and are ready to apply for some of those positions. So you don't want to limit yourself. If some of those are your long-term goals, make sure you factor that in. So on the grad school first side of the equation, I'd like to point out again that graduate school is not like the undergraduate experience. So the focus is on research and classes that are of interest to you. And so this can be a lot different than undergrad. And sometimes that's enough of a shift and enough of a change that it does give you that mental break that you need. You're also able to gain professional networks. So this is going to really help you then when you take that first step into your career to be able to launch that much quicker and start in positions that are either higher level or to be able to progress more quickly. You will not hit the career ceiling if you already have that graduate degree in your pocket. Then once you launch your career, you don't have to look back. You just keep looking forward and move through as high as you want to go. You also will be able to enjoy more career options. And there's a couple reasons for this. One is because you have that extra credential. That's just going to make you eligible for a lot more different types of positions that you can apply for. And two, because you have developed that professional network throughout your graduate school experience, you just have more contacts and more connections. You're more aware of the different types of positions that are out there, and you're able to pursue more of those opportunities. On the downside here, it certainly does require commitment and hard work. And so even though graduate school is different from undergrad, and sometimes that shift is different enough, it's definitely still hard work. I don't want to give the impression here that it's different enough and therefore it's not hard. That's certainly not the case. And so if you really are burnt out and just need to take a break, then sometimes that makes the most sense. But just make sure that you're considering these different factors as you're comparing that undergraduate and graduate school experience. It's generally most beneficial if you know an area of interest to pursue, and we're going to talk about that here in the next slide. The other thing I'd like to point out is that if you're not sure if you want to go all the way for a PhD, you can always start with a master's, and that's less of a time commitment and can be a really nice launching pad. It can give you that extra credential if you decide to stop with a master's and start your career, or a launching pad to continue on for the PhD after that. And then finally, let's take a look at the I have no idea what I want to do with my life factor. And this is kind of a challenging one to look at because there's a lot of different components that play in here and can kind of change my answer, if you will. But one way to think about this is if we kind of look at this spectrum, there are those that say they have no idea what they want to do and nothing really interests them. They haven't found anything that really grabs them, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you could be somebody that has no idea what you want to do because everything is interesting to you. You can't decide. There's so many things that are interesting, you don't even know which way to start. And so there's kind of this continuum of people here. So if you take a look here on the left side, if you're someone that is just not interested in things or haven't found your niche yet, then these are individuals that I often will encourage to go out and work for a while before graduate school. Getting that additional job experience will often expose you to things that you haven't experienced yet in more of a classroom setting going through your undergraduate degree. It can also work in the reverse, in that you may go out, get a position, and realize that you don't like it at all, that field is not what you thought it was going to be. And that can also actually be a positive thing, because then you know, okay, that's not the direction I want to go. And either at that point you jump careers, or you may want to think about going back to graduate school at that point to kind of retool, re-prepare yourself, and then launch your career from that. And so going out and getting that job experience can help direct your path forward. On the other end of the spectrum then, as we look over here at those where everything is interesting, I can tell you that you are somebody that at least at some point should go to graduate school, because this is the place to come where people are just interested in things. People love to learn, they love to explore, you'll be surrounded by people that also have a lot of interests. But in terms of your actual path, there's a couple of different ways to think about this, depending on how far off the spectrum you are here. If you're someone that really just doesn't even know where to start, you're interested in so many broad different areas, then you're also someone that could really benefit from going out and working for a while. That will often help you to focus in. As you go out, start working, you discover an area that, oh, this is interesting to me, this is what I'd like to pursue, I'd like to learn more about this. Here's a particular problem we've encountered, I'd like to now go back to graduate school and research this more deeply. And as I mentioned before, it can work in the opposite. You go out, you get a job that you don't like, and then you know, okay, you know what, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and so I'm going to jump over now to one of my other interests and explore this until you kind of narrow down, okay, this is kind of the direction that I want to go. I'm going to head back to grad school now for this. But I do need to put a little bit of a caveat in here, because it does really depend on kind of where you fall in this spectrum, because when you have a lot of interest, grad school can also be a very positive first step for you as well, if you at least have a general area that you know you want to pursue. It's very hard to go to grad school if you have interest in a lot of disparate areas, but if you at least have a general area that you know you're interested in, or an interdisciplinary topic that you may be able to weave together a couple of different disciplines to approach this particular topic. There's a lot of interdisciplinary work that happens in graduate schools. Then graduate school can be a really exciting place for you to go and be able to explore some of these ideas and be able to then narrow down your career path from that point. It is important to at least have a general idea, though, of what you want to study. You don't need to have a specific research project. That's something that your major professor and your advisory committee will help you formulate. But you need to at least have a general idea of the direction that you want to go. So in general, my advice is we kind of think through some of these different factors on if you should take some time off or continue straight on for grad school. I always encourage students to apply to both. And that seems like a simple answer, but it's also a very logical first step. If you're someone that's going to be graduating soon, take the opportunity to apply both to positions that interest you as well as to various graduate schools and see what opportunities then come back, because your decision may be much easier in a few months. If you get a dream offer from a company that you've always wanted to work at, then it may make sense to go and start working there. But if you get an offer from a graduate school and they're willing to fund you and you're able to study something that is interesting and exciting to you, then absolutely take advantage of that graduate school opportunity, go and pursue that degree, and then launch your career from there. So I hope these factors gave you some ideas to think about as you're thinking about whether it makes sense for you to take some time off and work or continue straight on for your graduate education. In general, most graduate students that are going on for what I'll call the traditional graduate degrees, the master's degrees and the PhD, most students do continue straight on from their undergraduate into graduate school. but not all. In fact, I actually took time off between my undergraduate and my master's degree. I worked for a couple of years, and that was really beneficial for me. It gave me a chance to explore more, identify areas that were interesting to me. And once I was out working, I realized that a lot of the positions that I was interested in required a graduate degree, and that made my decision that much easier and that much stronger that I wanted to go back and continue my career through graduate school.